Welcome to the grim, lawless 23rd century, following the fall of U.S. Gov and mass depopulation of major cities at the hands of the multi-trillionaire de Huberton family. Baptized in radioactive hellfire, a rare mutation makes Turbo a fiercely pumped scrapper, haunted by specters from her past, surviving the post-apocalyptic wasteland one deathmatch pit fight at a time. But when she rescues the stunning trophy girl, the unlikely duo are thrust into a harrowing odyssey, evading marauding berserkers at every turn on their way to the ultimate showdown as they uncover the horrific truth behind the fall of humanity.
Jake, where you
Kirby. Hello, welcome everybody. We are here making another episode of Making Turbo Pitfighter. This is an on-the-road episode for me, although
at?
Kurt is going to be inking as usual in his studio.
Yeah.
I'm visiting Florida once again, and I am going to be going to the comic shops here and finishing where I left off. There was one comic store in Daytona where I only got to check out about a third or a half of the dollar comics they had because they had so many. So I'll be back, and then I'm going down to Orlando, and there's a couple of comic stores down there. I checked one of them out, and I did pretty well. I got maybe like $30 or $40 comics there, and I'll be going to a different place this time. But that's where I am right now. It's like the end of summer vacation, getting ready to head back in um, to school in about 2 weeks and start another school year teaching middle school art. It's going to be my, can you believe it, my 17th year teaching.
Woo.
Wow.
Congratulations.
And then, yeah, when it's done, I'll have 3 more to go and I can retire or keep teaching if it's fulfilling. But, at some point, if you can retire, the question is, maybe you can make some money doing something else as you're getting a pension. So those are the questions for creatives. Am I better off doing this or doing that? I mean, teaching kids is great, but it's really tiring, man. Middle school is really tiring.
I bet.
So
I bet.
yeah, it's very physical. So I see that Kurt is he's inking a panel in which Turbo is socking the jaw of one of the hate breeders. Kurt is right in the middle of a kind of a battle sequence where the trophy girl was getting menaced and basically apprehended, kidnapped, dragged off, and Turbo comes racing out of the truck to save her yet again. And Turbo in issue 1 is going to realize that at least for now, she's better off sticking. Trophy is better off sticking with Turbo, and she will have to decide long term what she wants to do because it isn't going to be for a while when they get a breather. And as a matter of fact, Kurt, that sequence that you're doing, it's a multi-page battle sequence that is just going to lead into issue 2
Yeah.
where there's just another multi-page, like 9-page battle sequence where they're being chased and they're going to be fighting down to the last guy before they get a breather. There is going to be a breather in issue 2, but you're not there yet. You're in issue 1.
No standing around jabbering. No talking heads in this comic
A
here.
lot of
So
action. Well, there's some talking, but
yeah, but it's still in action. It's not like you have a static page of head to head to head to head to head. We're definitely
right. There's a lot
we're
of
giving them some punch
There's a
for their
lot of
lunch.
action, and because you can't, I mean, I guess I don't know if there's ever been a comic where it's just 32 pages of action. Um, I
Wasn't that always Jack Kirby though? I mean, you were
mm,
always.
not really.
Now, when you're saying action, you're saying like fighting things.
Yeah,
When
fighting
when
like
I think action, I'm thinking movement from panel to panel. In other words, like I'm literally saying, I'll grab a modern comic and I'll throw the panel up. It's literally head and shoulders for a whole entire page.
right.
That's not action. But when Jack was talking, the rooms were energized, and like yeah, at least that's the way I always thought of them. As
well,
one of them.
when Jack was right, I mean, action is very subjective. What is action? I mean, a spaceship taking off, that's action,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it depends. I mean, Jack Kirby used to just show these like panoramic scenes of like futuristic cities. That's
yeah.
action,
Yes,
that's
that's
value.
yep, yep.
I mean, to me, the thing you just want to avoid is like standing around talking. I mean, and I know you have to develop a story. It's unavoidable. And especially in the movies, right? When they're talking about, like an action movie, it's expensive, to do the stunts and the props and the sets and everything, and having people sitting around talking in a room is really cheap, to and so you have to have that, right? I don't care what movie you're talking about. You have to have a certain amount of like, downtime, because you just can't afford, it to be action packed, from every single frame. Although, maybe in animation, you say it's always action because you're always animating, right?
That's
But
right.
yeah, so um, what we do in Turbo Pit Fighter is we have flashbacks. So this way, if we have a 9-page action sequence, we break it up by Turbo going into flashback, and she's a kid again, and it isn't that there's going to be any standing around, but she's just having these adventures when she's a kid, and you know, Turbo issue 1 that Kurt's doing. You're gonna have like 10-year-old Turbo, and in Turbo number 2, it's gonna be like 15 or 16-year-old Turbo, or let's say adolescent Turbo. Um, so some time has passed in between issue number 1 and issue number 2, with young Turbo, but in old Turbo or adult Turbo, no time has passed. You're literally picking up, in the van where they're getting chased right after that battle sequence. So I don't know if I thought about it consciously, but we're spanning the years with young Turbo, and we're spanning the seconds with adult Turbo, and I think that's a good vehicle. We'll probably continue that. Um, Turbo, adult Turbo, the timeline maybe for the whole 6 issues would only be a couple of days, maybe. I don't know. I mean, should we? I
It
guess.
feels that way. It
Well,
does
no.
feel that way.
I am actually skipping some time. We are going to skip ahead for Turbo 3, um, where where adult Turbo is going to be in a pit fight. So, and Mr. Ike will be the corner man, and Trophy will be there, just kind of rooting on everything until it all goes sour, and the event is like hijacked, and then there'll be a battle, another battle scene,
Again.
battle scenes. I mean, am I wrong? I don't know. We just,
No, I
this
love
comic
it.
is
I
a
love
lot
it.
of battle scenes.
I love it.
And that's why we're doing the Substack, because the end of the world timeline, as we call it, if you go to substack.com/doommags, you can read all about the backstory stuff, and we're just releasing a little anecdote at a time about the world as it goes to pieces, and you could really get a lot of there's a lot of thinking that goes involved. The backstory, how the world came to be this way. Everybody at this point knows that the multi-trillionaire D. Huberton family grew and grew and grew to consolidate all industries into one big private company that became so powerful that it was able to overthrow the U.S. government. Um, the people of the U.S. didn't take that lightly. Most of them either became customers of the D. Huberton family and their 60 or so various companies, or they became part of the resistance. And the resistance, took a lot of different forms regionally. I call them cults, but they're basically factions that spring up, and there's going to be all these different formats for factions. That's going to be fun. Like there's going to be the Tuesday faction, which is a bunch of people that are preppers, and they're preparing for the fall of the U.S. government on Tuesday, which is going to be February 22nd, 2222. And then there's going to be other factions, which is like there's going to be a Capricorn cult, and it's going to be family and generations of people that are all Capricorns.
So that when is that birthday? I can't remember what that birthday is. The
Whatever it
months.
is,
What's the month for
they
Capricorn? Let me look
I
it
mean,
up.
talk
Let me look it
talk
up.
about talk about family planning. It's like they have to have kids that are Capricorns, otherwise. I mean, that's gonna be interesting. I don't know. I started plotting it out where they're going to be like somewhere on the eastern seaboard, and they are going to take over a pretty big area, as the size of a city or a county, and they're
So
going to
it's
have like,
interesting, Jake. So Capricorn is the duration is December 21st to January 19th.
okay,
So that's a pretty cool. That's a real good transitional time. So and of course it's the goat. You know what I mean? So stubborn as a goat.
right, and the funny thing is, if you're in a cult, I mean, this is going to be religious proportions of the belief system and the customs and the rituals and everything. But if you're planning, if you're a husband and wife or whatever you call yourself in those days, your husband, wife, whatever. But you have to guarantee that all your kids are Capricorns. That means you can't even be close to the cusp at all, because you
Wow.
could have a preemie, or you could have
Oh,
a delay, a, a delay, right?
wow.
So that means you gotta head for that mating season, right? That's gonna go right to the middle, so that you don't have to worry. I don't know. I'm playing around with this idea, and I don't know, with all of these bullet points that I'm coming up with, this will fall under the rise of the cult. Um, there's, there's going to be a lot of questions about, these sustainable societies, these little communities, and how they are able to survive, in this landscape where everything's privatized, or else the U.S. government, is trying to keep things as normal as possible, and then they ultimately just fall on Tuesday. Um, and the whole thing about Elevena, who is the kind of like the spiritual leader or the inspirational leader of the resistance, because she's a scientist, um, is that the thing that she's able to pull off is she's able to consolidate a lot of these cults into a unified resistance that lives in the new green zone, together, and that scale allows them to, have a military, an agricultural sector, production slash factory, sector, and and of course scientists are the most important thing, because their knowledge and their ability to control nanoparticles, will be life or death at that point. So a lot of different themes that we're playing around with, and yeah, if
Jake.
anybody, yeah.
So I just, I'm just zoning out, which, I just want to reiterate to people that Jake and I only meet every Sunday in the morning for an hour or so to do work on our comic and everything. And he's always giving me heads up, direction, new stuff, and this goes into the Substack. But I'm tying together just the 10 minutes ago what you were talking about. Just so everybody knows, like all of this scientific and sociological and psychological babble that's going on right now is literally tied into action packed comic.
Well, Turbo Pitfighter is
Come
our
on, Jake. I mean, come
Tur-
on.
Turbo. I mean, yeah, and
It's
that's
awesome.
gonna be the
It's
formula
awesome.
for the Substack. Kurt
Yes, yes,
has
yes.
encouraged me to put some of these thoughts down in writing, and so there's a writing component, and then do some spot illustrations. You can see right now I'm doing some spot illustrations, right? Like here is a robot chick. There's going to be pleasure bots. There's going to be battle bots. There's going to be all kinds of different bots. Here's a scene where Elvina is enhancing one of the five, which is going to be her, super squadron. And so all of these things, there'll be illustrations and there'll be stories and writing, but Turbo Pitfighter is the comic where it culminates in sequential art and just action scenes and battle scenes.
Yes.
But
Yes.
the update, if you're following this channel closely, is that we spoke last week about I finished a 6-page script for a
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
another artist to do, and it
Whew.
is an action-packed six
Oh
page
my.
full of battle sequences and story. But in order to get into that story, there's a kind of a prose introduction, and then there's like a little dialogue between a robot and a person like at a kiosk who's entering information, and then you have the battle scene, right? So, and that story will tie in to the greater timeline because Pitch Blend is enhanced super vixen, and she's able to make, incredible amount of decisions on the fly. She's got incredible technology. When you shoot a gun, it's like homing bullets so that it finds its target no matter if you just basically, aim it in the right direction. And so a lot happens really fast. And one of the things that I wanted to bring out in that script, which is called The Company Man, is that there's just going to be drones everywhere, right? The sky, the air around everybody is going to be just full of drones all the time. These little flying things that have different shapes and different sizes and different functions, but there really is just going to be a lot of them, and it's going to have to be budgeted for both both the Dehubertans and the Resistance, if they want to have an edge in these combat sequences, that they need to have drones there supporting their cause, right? And so we'll learn a little bit about that in The Company Man. But yeah, I was just thinking, like, in terms of like meeting with Kurt every week and getting some feedback and getting some direction, um is I have to, like, for every one of these bullet points and subcategories, I need to just try to like hone in on like a little 6-page sequence so that I can do the same thing and write another 6-page script that will then be available for an artist, to execute. And, that could look like somebody that I eventually hire, and or it could look like a collaboration. If there's an artist out there looking for some free scripts and wants to collab, or maybe I get around to it myself one day. If I'm on a vacation or something, I could do the pencils on a 6-pager. It's possible. But we also are just trying to keep regular with our making turbo, and right now I'm going to be on the road for 2 weeks, 2 Sundays, and I'll be back to doing pages of Turbo Pitfighter again, doing pencils, and so right now Kurt's catching up a little on his inks, issue one, and I'll be back to doing pencils for issue two. But in the meantime, there's all this other stuff that we're doing here, and Sunday is our day to plan it, to execute it, to talk about it with our audience, and and network. We just finished a great episode of Indie Creator Exchange, and so Kurt and I get really excited to meet these guys.
Oh, it's so awesome. Alex
So far,
Turbin, everybody.
so far it's all been
Alex
mailed. We haven't.
Turbin.
Yeah,
Woo!
we just spoke with Alex Turner. Look at that. I see. I only got like 5 of his comics here.
Well, he obviously likes me better, so.
Well, they're really thin. They're really. I mean,
Yeah,
these are
yeah,
these
yeah.
these are just like
10 pagers.
10 pages, right?
But he's putting them out. He's putting them out monthly. I mean,
Right, and that's a great
he's on
thing.
a deadline. He's on a
That's a
deadline.
that's a great thing. He's meeting a monthly schedule, and 10 pages is fair. This is a guy that is really prolific and really dedicated, and it's we heard a lot of the same story. People can watch this as soon as it's posted. I guess this will be posted like in what, a week or two.
Yeah.
Right. So by the time you're hearing us, it'll already be posted. But this is a guy he's got a lot of great art. He's got a lot of great ideas. He is tied up in the power comic scene, and so that's a great angle, for some artists, to take on, because power comics are a lot more forgiving in the style. It doesn't have to be like a Marvel house style necessarily, or like a professional polished style. The anatomy doesn't have to be perfect.
It's so personal. It's just
Yeah,
so
and and,
personal. That's what
and
I
what
love
comes
about Power Comics.
what comes through is the passion and
Yeah,
of storytelling, right?
totally. Totally.
Because when we were in junior high school, and we used to like steal Rexo paper and fold it in half and make comics, and then hand it over to your friend,
Yep. Yep.
to do the next couple of pages, and then they hand it back. You
Yep.
had these incredible action sequences and
Yes.
ideas, right?
Yes.
It wasn't people standing around
That's
talking
right.
about, I invented this technology in 1943. No, it's like, it brings you back to like the real joy of comics for kids, which is just like, during action sequences, heroes and villains, monsters, sci-fi, twists and turns, and imitating the professionals, that we all admire, right? Frank Miller and Jack Kirby,
Yep.
like reading some Daredevil comics where they're fighting Bullseye and just getting inspired and like, all right, I'm gonna make my own character. He's gonna have horns. That's how it works when you're
Hell
just a
yeah.
kid. We were just dumb kids. But then you
That's a
grow up
comic.
and you realize that life isn't worth living unless you're going back to that joy of
Yeah.
this art style. You want to be creative, but you don't want to just sit there and paint a canvas of like a boat on a river or something like that. You want to paint, or you want to like create stories. I was gonna say, you want to paint pictures, paint in people's minds.
Yeah.
The and the thing that you see on the page is only like the part of it. There's so much that's like suggestion, and that's what power comics do. It's a great angle to come in from, because you might I mean, I remember from the graffiti world, you had your style guys, and then you had your taggers, right? And
Yep.
everybody used to criticize, oh man, yeah, that guy's style isn't good, he's just a tagger, he isn't like advancing the aesthetic, into the future. And it's like, yeah, but you know what? That motherfucker is like, his tag is everywhere, right?
Everywhere. That's right.
And so that dude gets more respect because he's all city, and he's got the drips, he's got multiple subway lines, he's got, basically like a following. And it doesn't matter that you're not the style guy. You make up for it in other ways. And then I'm an art teacher, so when it really comes down to it, everybody has a style. Every
Heck
one of
yeah.
my students, I tell them, I have students, I can't draw, don't make me draw. Mr. Jacobs, don't make me try to draw because I can't draw. They say it right on the first day. And I'm like, I said, everybody has a style, and when you find your style, you know, you could be the next, Jean Miro, or you could be the
Well,
next
Jake,
Pollock.
Jake,
Yes, sir.
when somebody finds their style, they find their joy. And that's what art really is all about. and
Good
and
point. Yeah.
I know you go about that, but you're also in a professional situation where you've got to prepare some amount of kids to engage upper grade and college level and training in order to get a job and maintain a lifestyle. But really, out of the gate, what we're talking about, and power comics really for me reflect that. Alex Turbin, 125 million%. That style is all passion, and I can spend more
No, no,
time.
no, no. I gotta stop you.
No,
It's a
okay, okay.
combination of passion and storytelling.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. I'll take
Right?
that. I'm not gonna.
Because the passion comes through, and that makes up for a lot. If you can't draw like Neil Adams, or you can't draw like
Right,
Jim
right,
Lee,
right,
right?
right,
Because
right.
I can't, but your passion makes up for that. I mean, and so if you have a style and you're trying to do realistic figures in proportion with perspective and all that, those are all the things that an art teacher tries to teach kids. Because if you can master those tools, if you can master those skills, you can put yourself on a different footing. And yeah, you might get a call from Marvel, DC, it's all possible. But there's also this whole other world out there, that the power comics people are celebrating. And people have been putting these comics out forever,
Yeah,
but they've never been celebrated
yeah,
before. People used to say, "Oh, wow, this is, some guy, his anatomy is no good. This is all." Well, neither was Jack Kirby's. I got news for you.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, he was purposely doing a shorthand. And so when somebody finds their style, Kurt makes a great point. It's a great way of looking at it. It's when you find your joy in
Hmm.
drawing a certain way, because then you're like, okay, I got my formula now. I can go page after page after page, and I'll
Yeah,
never get bored with this because I'm doing it in a way that makes me happy. And
makes
and what makes them happy is that you're getting a result, on the page that is art for art's sake. It's not about I'm trying to be the next Frank Rosetta. It's
love it.
that I'm making the art that needs to come out of me,
Yep.
to
Which was Frank
exercise
Frazetta, by the way.
my right.
You want to talk about shitty anatomy, shitty storytelling? Go back to the first Frank Miller stuff, and everybody knows. Klaus Janson carried that kid for a long time when it came to inking like Daredevil. So let's not beat around the bush. But that was the comic book that I was led into Marvel Comics, was the Frank Miller, Klaus Johnson Daredevils with Elektra and the Hand and the Ninjas. And once again, very accessible to draw. I remember drawing Elektra-based Daredevil comics all the time because Miller was no Neil Adams. Miller was no, John Buscema, John Romita. He was trying to figure out Frank Miller. And then when I get a copy of Ronin, which is my favorite comic book, Marvel DC, hands down. Out of all the comic books that have ever been produced,
Mm-hmm.
Ronin by Frank Miller is my favorite. I once again was like, what is he doing? Now I knew about Mobius and oh man, I forget his name for Lone Wolf and Cub, but I was reading that stuff too because of heavy
Yeah.
metal and having some manga. But the way he was translating it, I was like very lost. And then the next thing he does, he's Frank Miller. So
Yeah, I mean, Frank Miller is he's an example of a guy that found his style. I mean, you could say he had his Marvel style, and then he had his Sin City style. And
Mm.
Ronin, I'm not as versed in. Maybe you could tell us, but when he found his Sin City style, um, that you know, it was like Jack Kirby in that he didn't care if his anatomy was right, or he was basically at that point cartooning.
Wow. Yeah.
What he wanted to do was he wanted to convey a story, and he was sacrificing everything else, because for him he needed to have a certain amount of speed in order to just get through everything. That's what made him happy, that's what gave him joy, that was his vision, is not to spend so much time on the page. And then he invents this whole new angle of looking at comics, which threw everybody into a tizzy, which was positive negative, right?
Yeah.
And looking at everything as a positive or negative, right?
He's
And then
ripping me off.
what's it? Yeah, so he
I
goes.
remember a lot of people were saying he's ripping me off. I remember standing in comic book shops and I was buying my next issue of Sin City, and somebody would be standing behind me and they'd be like, "You're buying that shit, man? He's ripping you off. It's just a bunch of
Right.
black shapes on white paper." And I'm like, "Well, isn't that all comics? You know?" Bing.
No, it's not, because he was silhouetting things, and he was doing knockouts. I mean, it's a really good lesson for me, which I don't really get to I don't really get to teach to my general audience students, but when I have like my advanced kids, I'll pull out positive negative. We go into the history of silhouette, and then we'll go into the idea of a silhouette with knockouts, right? Because if
Yeah.
you just have a silhouette, you just have one outer shape. But if you then knock out some key lines or key shapes within that silhouette, you can convey not only detail, but you could also convey layering, right? And like you could just see that Frank Miller was just having so much fun in his mind with these, staircases and windows and wrinkles, and like gunshots and everything. And he was drawing things without actually drawing them. He was basically just silhouetting them, and layering them, and he was just having so much fun because he he realized that you can completely do this and have fun with this within the context of a sequential comic story, and his stories, they got us right, like we were following along so closely, but they were also kind of derivative of just like hard boiled noir, real kind of gritty, and then maybe even a little gory, characters, the guy's in pursuit of a serial killer, and
Cannibal.
he dismembers people. There's a mob boss, and there's a beautiful mall, and there's all this or mall, and the guy, he endures a lot of pain and suffering, along the way. He's a very flawed character. All that stuff just got us and gripped us, and so. Um, just to get off Frank Miller, he found his joy and he found his style, not his first style, but his second style, right? And then he kind of like reinvented this whole, I mean, this whole kind of aesthetic subgenre, and copycats abounded. We were talking about Death Blow in Image Comics. That was Jim Lee, right? Not Jay Lee, but Jim Lee. I mean,
Yeah.
Jay Lee also had a lot of that too. Everybody was influenced at the time, and it's really fun as just kind of like an assignment or a challenge for an artist to,
Leveling up.
yeah, to think about something in a very high contrast, positive or negative, way. I mean, we might use some silhouettes here and there in Turbo Pitfighter, but we don't really have like a silhouette with a foreground element in front of it knocked out. And it's like you have, because everybody thinks like, oh, it's quicker this way, and so it's not as good, it's not as valuable, it's a shortcut. And it's like, no, actually, when you see how he works, you have to draw everything first in order to simplify it, later, because you have to see how everything, flows together, and where to position it all. So it's Frank Miller's just one example, of comic artists, professionals who found a groundbreaking style, and was able to really just reinvent the books. Like Will Eisner, you put in that category. Jack Kirby, you put in that category. Frazetta, you put in that category. When they Frazetta, it was really a little bit more with painting, and the idea of mixing colors that you don't think belong together, right? And it just works, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But he also had his line work and his composition work, his backgrounds. I love the way he like makes these vague backgrounds, to just make like the backgrounds kind of melt away in your mind. Like this part isn't important, right? It's just there to frame up, the barbarian and the damsel in distress, and the the evil monster guy. So all these guys bring a lot to the table. But just to circle back, power comics means that you know anybody, anybody, I don't care how you draw, anybody can be successful in storytelling, and even developing an audience for a character or storyline. I mean, it might take 30 more years than you thought, because you get discovered as a cult favorite like Jontar, right? And they got to come
Wow.
find you, and you're working in a car wash or something, and you forgot all about these comics that you made, when you were a kid. But whatever it is, I mean, that's the charm of it. It's like, because it was folk art, it was made for art's sake at the time. Somebody,
Can I stop you?
go ahead.
Can I stop you? I believe, because that was one of the, we just want to point everybody to the Alex Turbin indie creator exchange interview we did. I'll put a link down below. But one of the things Alex said was, in the beginning, he was going after the Holy Grail, which was working for one of the big twos, Marvel or DC. Even went to Joe Kubert, but he had that beautiful little bump in the road, which was a bunch of guys got together in his hometown up in
Mm,
Maine, and they said, you know what, let's split up the duties, let's make a comic book. And they solicited to Diamond, and they did everything right. But then it turns around that it's not a big success financially. It doesn't grab a lot of attention. The criticism is it's not very well drawn, written, which is what the power comics guys get deemed on, dinged on. But that doesn't stop him. That doesn't
right.
stop him. I'm not even saying that that might have even pushed him. I just think what happened was, for everything you hit in a speed bump, it's either going to push you further or it's going to stop you. And that's completely a decision on your own. Who's going to read your comic is nowadays a hard thing to be determined. I think if you want to make the best decision as a comic book artist, move to Japan and work for one of those guys.
Yeah,
Work,
but
go to Japan, work, because it's not happening here in this country right now. The only thing that's happening in this country is indie comics, and that is a very loosely interpreted landscape. It's not as solid and concrete footing as everybody thinks it is. Even when I came back 9 years ago, back into the scene, I thought, oh yeah, I just put my foot here and I'll do it. Nope, nothing was there, and I fell right through and had to start figuring things out and getting out there and meeting people. And everybody I met, by the way, indie comic wise, not only the nicest people, but the most resourceful people because they're willing to share their experiences. So also
Yeah.
link to Alex Turbin's YouTube channel, which is one of my top three favorites in watching. So thank you, Alex, and keep it up.
Right. Yeah. Here's a guy that's not only a creator, but has also gotten into the reviewer space, and he's an evangelist, right? He's an
That's a good way of putting it. I don't know if
he
he would
he
like that, but
well, I mean, people shouldn't think like that he's like, trying to like preach or raise money, but he
spewing.
is exposing another generation of audiences to an
Yeah,
era of comics, and
yeah.
he says mix in the bigs, with the indie stuff. But it's comics, that people would never ever see if not for stumbling on his YouTube channel.
And I didn't.
And
I didn't. Sorry, I didn't get to tell him this. Is I've bought five comics based on those low viewing uh, videos he put out that he was talking about. So
right.
sorry to interrupt, but they
Yeah,
work.
so
They work.
yeah, so and some people are going to go out and buy the comics, right? Because like somebody like Kurt, he has his pulse on hey, this isn't a lot of money to go grab and just order, from one of my retailers. And so you could be holding it in your hands within like 2 or 3 days, or a week, but it's really just um understanding there is a whole, there's generations of people that have been, just plugging away in their little, drawing table and their little home studios. And, I liken it to music because, there's so many like musicians out there and bands and everything, and they do their thing. But to actually produce an album and release it, that is something
Jeez.
that puts you in the record books, right? It's a
Yeah.
document
Yeah.
that puts you in the record books, and it might be 50 years after you're dead, or it might be 100 years after you're dead, that people come across it. Maybe they use it in a TikTok video, and you become a viral thing that all of a sudden people are bopping around to your melodies. And you might be in the ground and you never realized any of this, right? So that's what I call art for art's sake. When you're making something which is really just unleashing your vision and your joy and your passion, somebody somewhere will recognize it if they get a chance to see it. You just get the right person in the right mood, and they could put this on their channel, and next thing you know, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of other eyeballs on it, right? And
Yeah.
that's just how it works. And it's an incredible thing, to know. And it doesn't matter if you're making comics or music or writing a book or writing, a screenplay or doing theater. It could be philosophy, it could be anything. I mean, 1,000 years ago, it was all oral tradition, right? There was no like, papyrus or any, or you had to carve it into a stone, or maybe I should say like, 10,000 years ago. There was no way, to get it out there. It was all just oral tradition. But whatever you starts with you, right? And it comes from you, and it's all original, you know, and it goes to other people, you know, and it spreads, to other people, and they keep going with it, right? Like a song that keeps singing, people keep singing for generations, right? Or a character, like Casper the Ghost, or any of these characters that are just, going on and on for generations. It's something, it's like a virus, right? It just, propagates itself, and it's going to stay alive as long as somebody cares about it. And so that's what Alex Turbin is doing for indie creators on his channel, and we do it too. You know, we come across a lot of indie books, and we do our comics that influence. And Dan Snow, right? He's doing this for, you know, he's finding a lot of comics on the Lost Highway that he's spotlighting, and you're like, oh wow, how did I ever, you know, not see that one, you know? And it's a great thing to do. So you could be a collector, you could just be, you know, somebody that just, you know, likes to spend time watching YouTube videos and seeing flip throughs. You could be a creator that is always looking to get an inspiration from somewhere, and you never know what that next inspiration is going to be, right?
Jake.
And that's why it's great to be in this world. What?
We're coming up on our 45 minutes, and we like to get these people back to reading comics, making them if they choose. I also want to add one more to the list. Alex Turbin, Dan Snook's Rave Sensation, and Rolly Zero. These are my three top
Say it
go-tos.
slow. What was the last one?
Rowley, Rowley 0. All links in the description. He's another great comic book reviewer. He really goes off, I would say, into the deep end of power comics or like European comics.
Uh huh.
Just really, 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 really good aesthetics. So I want to thank those three if they're watching, and to keep them coming, because I look forward to them every time they come up. So, but that's all I got for these people. What do you got on the way out there, Jake?
Nothing on the way out. I am going to, when we get back to our regular production, I am going to review the latest Alien Romulus movie, which was actually pretty good.
Okay.
And so we'll be doing that probably in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, and I'm just working on. I'm just doing lots of drawing, lots of sketches, lots of, you know, female,
Cool.
you know, enhanced Super Squadron people. But I'm also looking for, you know, feedback and input. If anybody is you know, looking at our Substack, and you want to, you know, suggest an area to zoom into and focus a little more on, go ahead and put a comment. Either email us or put a comment on our community tab right here on YouTube, and then check out our other series. We have Comics That Influence and the Indie Creator Exchange. But that's all I got, Kurt.
Awesome. Have a great day at the beach.
All right, I will. I'm not going to the beach, but I'm down by the beach.
Yeah, I can tell by those bikini-clad girls right there.
Well, I got sunburned on the first day walking from the
Oh,
car to the
dude.
beach. So
All
just put
right.
me under a towel.
All
All
right.
right,
I'll
man.
see you when you get back.
See you Sunday, Kurt. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.